I walked into the small, dimly lit examination room, clipboard in hand, my heart beating just a bit faster than usual. It wasn't my first time assisting with a patient's checkup, but something about this particular assignment felt different. Uneasy. Almost like the air itself was heavier. As a nurse at a busy downtown clinic, I'd seen just about everything. I'd grown used to long hours, unpredictable patients, and the quiet, emotional toll that came from being present in other people's most vulnerable moments. But this was new. Mr. Warren was already sitting on the examination table when I entered. He was in his early 50s, soft-spoken and reserved, the kind of man who kept to himself and didn't ask for much. He came in regularly for blood pressure and cardiac monitoring, routine checkups. There had never been anything unusual. But today felt off. "Good afternoon, Mr. Warren," I said gently, offering a soft smile as I stepped inside. "You doing all right today?" He gave a quick nod, but the tension in his body told a different story. His posture was rigid, his eyes unsettled, darting around the room like he was searching for something invisible. I could feel the discomfort emanating from him, and I instinctively wanted to ease it. "I'll just help you get settled for the exam," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and reassuring. I stepped closer to adjust the monitoring equipment, and gently tugged the edges of his paper gown to ensure his comfort and modesty. As I worked, I noticed him flinch slightly, his breathing quickening just enough to catch my attention. Something was weighing on him, not physically but emotionally. The kind of weight people carry alone for too long. I paused, meeting his eyes for a brief moment. They were shadowed with something I couldn't yet name, anxiety, perhaps, or fear. "You're in safe hands," I said quietly, not sure why I added it, but feeling like he needed to hear it. "Let's go ahead and get you positioned for the doctor." He nodded again, more slowly this time. As he shifted on the table, the edge of his gown slipped awkwardly, exposing more than he likely intended. I quickly turned my head, immediately stepping in to fix the sheet with calm precision. No judgment. Just dignity. That's what we're taught. That's what I believed. "I've got you," I murmured, covering him again, making sure he was comfortable. But the moment had rattled him, and me, if I'm honest. It wasn't about what was seen or exposed. It was the suddenness. The vulnerability of it. The silence that stretched between us afterward, thick with things neither of us could find the words to say. Before I could reassure him further, the door creaked open behind me. "Oh, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt," came a surprised voice. Another nurse peeked her head in, blinking at the stillness in the room. She must have sensed the tension because she quickly retreated, pulling the door shut behind her. I turned back to Mr. Warren. He was staring down at his hands, clenched tightly in his lap. "Mr. Warren," I said softly, kneeling just enough to be at eye level, "is everything all right? You seem troubled." He looked up, and for the first time since I'd known him, his carefully guarded expression faltered. "My wife passed 3 months ago," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I haven't told anyone." "Not really." The air in the room changed again, this time, not with discomfort but with grief. Honest, raw grief. "I'm so sorry," I said, placing a gentle hand over his. "Thank you for trusting me with that." He nodded, blinking quickly to hold back tears. "I didn't expect to feel so alone in here today." "I understand," I said. And I did. More than he knew. For the next few moments, we sat in silence, not as nurse and patient, but as two people acknowledging the fragile, painful humanity in each other. When the doctor came in shortly after, Mr. Warren was ready, not just for the exam, but for whatever healing could come next. Sometimes, the deepest care isn't in medicine, it's in presence. In dignity. In bearing witness to pain that has no diagnosis. And that day in that small room, something quietly sacred unfolded. Warren looked mortified. He hurried to pull the gown across his lap, face flushed a deep crimson. The room, though still, was thick with tension, like a held breath that neither of us could release. I'm really sorry about that, he murmured, eyes locked on his hands, too ashamed to meet mine. I inhaled slowly, centering myself. It's okay, I said with quiet reassurance. Let's just get you ready for your exam. All right, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I turned to retrieve a fresh set of linens from the cabinet, forcing my mind to focus. Routine. Procedure. Keep it professional. That was my anchor. But just as I reached for the supplies, I felt his hand brush lightly against mine. I froze. It was brief, just a touch, but something about the way it lingered unsettled me. Was it accidental? Or something more deliberate? I didn't want to overthink it. Still, my instinct sparked with caution. This wasn't just about discomfort, it was about boundaries. I straightened up slowly, pretending I hadn't noticed. My training kicked in: always de-escalate, never assume, and above all, maintain professionalism. Just then, the door swung open. Dr. Anders entered, cheerful as ever, flipping through Mr. Warren's chart. Everything all right in here? He asked with a smile, clearly unaware of the heavy stillness that had just preceded him. Yes, doctor, I replied quickly, stepping aside. Mr. Warren's ready. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I needed to get out of that room before the emotions I was holding back started to show. As the doctor launched into his routine questions, I slipped out quietly, my pulse still racing. The soft click of the door closing behind me brought no relief. That moment stayed with me like a shadow. Later that afternoon, I was deep into my charting, trying to reclaim some normalcy, when my phone buzzed with a message from the front desk. Mr. Warren has requested Nurse Jenna for tomorrow's follow-up. I stared at the screen, stomach knotting. Why me? Had I done something wrong? Was it simply that I'd been the one present during his moment of vulnerability? Or was there something deeper beginning to take root, something I didn't want to name? The next day came too fast. I found myself once again standing outside Mr. Warren's exam room, clipboard in hand, forcing my thoughts into order. I reminded myself to stay calm. Stay professional. Keep a safe distance, not just physically but emotionally. When I knocked and stepped inside, our eyes met, and instantly, the unease from before came flooding back. This time, however, his demeanor had changed. He greeted me with a smile, not the anxious, embarrassed smile from before, but one that felt measured. Confident. Controlled. I've been thinking about you, he said softly. My heart skipped, a visceral reaction I quickly buried. I let out a short, polite chuckle. Let's focus on your checkup, Mr. Warren, I said firmly, trying to guide the moment back to solid ground. But even as I moved toward his file, checking the monitor setup and preparing the blood pressure cuff, my thoughts weren't as clear as they should have been. What had shifted? He wasn't inappropriate, no lines had been crossed. Yet his presence felt charged with something I couldn't name. Something unspoken. The quiet between us was no longer awkward but heavy. Intentional. I had seen countless patients. Vulnerable people. People in pain. People grieving. And I'd always been the calm in the storm. But something about Warren, his loss, his silence, and now, this strange sense of emotional reach, made the boundary harder to draw. Still, I knew I had to draw it. Because I was a nurse. Because he was a patient. Because sometimes, people's loneliness wears masks, ones that reach out in ways they don't fully understand. Your heart rate looks good today, I said, keeping my voice measured. We'll do your usual vitals and then the doctor will see you shortly. He nodded and to his credit, didn't say anything further. But I could feel it, the way his eyes lingered, the quiet questions behind them. Questions he wouldn't ask. And ones I couldn't answer. Something wasn't right. That feeling, quiet but insistent, raced through me as I left Mr. Warren's room the previous day. And deep down, I knew that whatever had just begun, it wasn't over. The next morning, I walked into the clinic with a clear plan: keep my distance. The unease hadn't left me overnight. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, reading too much into a moment with a vulnerable patient. Maybe Mr. Warren had simply been embarrassed, awkward in his grief. Maybe his smile meant nothing. But then I remembered the request. He had asked for me again. And that smile, too confident to be accidental, lingered in my mind. I buried myself in work. Morning vitals, lab orders, patient intake. I didn't let myself think about yesterday. I moved room to room like a machine, efficient and focused. But just after 10 a.m., the front desk buzzed through. Mr. Warren is ready in exam room 3. He's asked for you specifically. My stomach turned. I reached for the chart with a steady hand, even as the knot inside me pulled tighter. This time, I wouldn't allow ambiguity. I wouldn't second-guess myself. I would be clear, firm, and distant if needed. Just get through it. I knocked once, then entered exam room 3. Mr. Warren sat upright, already in a gown. His posture was relaxed, too relaxed. His hands folded neatly in his lap. His eyes held that same unreadable calm. "Good morning," I said, my voice professional, brisk. "Let's get you prepped." He smiled again. That same unsettling ease. "I'm glad it's you," he said smoothly. I paused mid-step. Then straightened. "We're going to focus on your care today," I replied firmly, refusing to engage further. He didn't object. Just nodded silently. But the expression on his face didn't change. It held something still, something watching. Waiting. I moved to his side, careful with my steps and my hands. Adjusted the tubing. Checked the monitor. All clinical. Every movement deliberate. But then, as I leaned slightly to secure the blood pressure cuff around his arm, he spoke again. His voice was soft, barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking about you." That was the moment the line was crossed. My jaw tightened. I didn't look up. "Mr. Warren," I said, evenly, "I'm here to assist with your medical care. Not to engage in personal conversation." There was no anger in my tone, only steel. Professional boundaries drawn like a line in the sand. He didn't flinch. Just smiled, as if he had expected this. As if it was part of some silent dialogue only he was having. His gaze stayed fixed on me, unblinking. Measuring. Before I could take a step back, the door swung open behind me. I jumped slightly, then exhaled in relief, hoping it was the doctor. But it wasn't. A woman stood in the doorway. Mid-40s, sharply dressed. Not in scrubs. Not part of our staff. She stepped in with quiet confidence, her eyes scanning the room with calculated precision. First me. Then him. Her voice was calm, but clipped. "Am I interrupting something?" I turned slightly to face her, every muscle in my back tensed. Mr. Warren's expression shifted. Only slightly, but it was enough. Something unreadable flickered across his face. Something caught. "No, not at all," he replied, his tone forced and overly casual. I straightened, my heart thudding. "I was just finishing up. I'll leave you two alone." Without waiting for permission or pleasantries, I slipped past her and out of the room. The hallway felt colder than usual. My pulse echoed in my ears, but I walked steadily, determined not to let it show. I was already in the hallway by the time the door clicked shut behind me. The breath I'd been holding escaped in a sharp exhale. My heart was pounding, not from fear, exactly, but from the weight of everything I wasn't allowed to say. I could still see her face in my mind, the sharp lines of her expression, her piercing gaze, the calm but cutting way she spoke. That was his wife. I didn't need a chart to confirm it. I didn't need words. I could feel it. And she knew. Or at the very least, she suspected something had happened. Something inappropriate. Something she hadn't seen, but could sense like smoke after fire. I tried to focus back at the nurse's station, on charts, on medication logs, anything that felt solid and neutral. But her stare stayed with me. That brief look, like she had walked into a room expecting to find one story, but discovered the edges of another. I didn't know if I'd just escaped something dangerous, or something deeply humiliating. Later that afternoon, while organizing intake forms, my screen lit up with a new message. Mr. Warren has asked for you again tomorrow. Wants you to assist during the follow-up exam. I stared at the words in disbelief. Again? No. This had to stop. I walked straight to Dana, the lead nurse. She was sorting the next day's assignments at the central terminal. Hey, Dana, I began cautiously, I need to ask if someone else can be assigned to Mr. Warren tomorrow. She glanced up. Any particular reason? I chose my words carefully. He just seems a little too comfortable. I'd prefer to keep some professional distance. Her brow furrowed. We're a bit short tomorrow, but I'll see what I can do. I nodded, but her response didn't bring relief. I had a feeling that seeing what she could do might not be enough. The next morning came too soon. I checked the assignment sheet, holding my breath. My name was still beside his. I stood there for a moment, my coffee cooling in my hand, the clinic bustling quietly around me. I had a choice to make, avoid it or face it. And I knew I couldn't keep sidestepping forever. So I took a deep breath, pulled myself together, and walked toward exam room 3, not just as a nurse, but as a woman who had drawn a line. A professional. Someone who knew who she was. When I stepped inside, Mr. Warren was already seated. But something had changed. He wasn't relaxed. He wasn't smiling. He was staring out the window, his hands clenched tight in his lap. I wanted to talk to you, he said without turning around. I didn't move past the doorway. About what? He turned slowly, finally meeting my gaze. About what happened. Before. I stayed exactly where I was. My voice was even. I'm here to assist with your care, Mr. Warren. If you have anything else to discuss, it should be with administration. He shook his head slowly. You don't have to pretend. I know you felt it too. A chill spread through my chest, cold and sharp. He had convinced himself of something that wasn't there. I think you've misunderstood, I said, each word deliberate and calm. Whatever you believe happened, didn't happen. He leaned forward slightly, not aggressive but intense. You didn't walk away the first time. Just then, the door creaked open behind me. We both turned toward the sound. And there she was, his wife. She stepped inside quietly, her eyes scanning the room like a searchlight. They moved from me to him, landing and pausing on each of us as if reading a page of a book we hadn't written together but now shared responsibility for. Her voice was low, but it cut straight through the tension. What's going on here? She asked the question so simply, but her voice held weight. What's going on here? I stepped back instinctively. I was just leaving, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. As I moved past her and exited the room, I could feel her eyes on me, sharp and searching, like shards of glass behind a polite mask. The door closed softly behind me, but its silence did nothing to dull the ache building inside my chest. I walked the hallway like I was underwater, every breath tight, every step uncertain. Something about all of it, the tension in the room, his eyes, her voice, felt deeply wrong. And I knew, somehow, in the quiet clarity that sometimes comes with fear. This wasn't over. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. I stuck to my duties with rigid focus, charting vitals, organizing reports, answering patient questions, anything that kept me from thinking too much. But the anxiety sat just under my skin, twitching like a second pulse. Each time I passed near exam room 3, I tensed, waiting for a door to open, a voice to call my name, a confrontation to begin. It never came. But something else did. Again and again, like a drumbeat on my screen. Mr. Warren has requested you for his next visit. No explanation. Just a notification. Cold. Clinical. But behind it, a message he wasn't saying aloud. I'm not done. By the end of the day, I was drained. I clocked out with trembling fingers and made my way toward the staff exit, desperate for the kind of air that didn't smell like antiseptic or tension. And then I saw him. Mr. Warren stood by the double doors, coat on, like he was waiting for a cab, or for me. I froze. I just wanted to talk, he said. His voice was lower now, softer, casual, like we were old friends catching up after a long shift. My eyes flicked around. A few nurses were still moving past the main desk, chatting about weekend plans. No one seemed to notice him. Or me. Mr. Warren, this isn't appropriate, I said, my voice calm but firm. He stepped a little closer. You don't have to be scared of me. I'm not scared, I replied, though I was lying. But I am uncomfortable. You've crossed a line. Before I could step away, another voice rang out. Jenna. I turned, startled. It was Mark, from radiology, waving, smiling brightly, clearly oblivious to the tension in the air. I lifted my hand, grateful beyond words for the interruption. When I turned back, Mr. Warren had already taken a step backward, his expression unreadable. Another time then, he murmured. I didn't answer. I walked past him, past the sliding doors, into the cool early evening air, and kept walking until the hospital was behind me. The next morning, I went straight to Dana's desk. I need to be reassigned from Mr. Warren's care, I said without hesitation this time. For my safety, and for my peace of mind. She looked up, surprised. Again? Yes, I said. I'm not comfortable. Dana hesitated, then nodded slowly. All right. I'll make it work. Even though we were short-staffed, she didn't ask for more details. Maybe she saw something in my face. Maybe she had seen too much of this kind of thing before. I didn't go near exam room 3 that day. I filled in elsewhere, checked in on elderly patients in recovery, assisted with triage, helped clean and restock the supply carts. Small things but grounding. Normal. Safe. For the first time in days, I felt like I was taking back some control. But in the quiet of a break room that afternoon, as I sat alone with my coffee and exhaled for what felt like the first real time all shift, I knew in my heart something had shifted forever. I had seen something, a side of vulnerability, confusion, and power I wasn't trained for. And I was still standing. But I was changed. I was sitting in the quiet of the break room, finally allowing myself a breath, when the notification lit up my screen again. Patient Warren requesting Nurse Jenna urgent. I stared at it for a long moment. My stomach twisted. I could have ignored it. I could have asked someone else to go. But I didn't. Instead, I clipped my badge back onto my scrubs, stood up, and made my way to room 3 with a resolve I hadn't felt before. If he tried anything, I was going to shut it down. Directly. Clearly. Without hesitation. When I entered the room, I expected him to speak right away, to greet me with another too familiar smile. But he didn't. Mr. Warren was sitting on the edge of the exam bed, staring silently out the window. His posture was tight, his expression serious. I need to speak with you, he said without turning around. I stayed near the door, my voice calm but clipped. Is it about your care? No, he replied. It's about what happened. I've already explained, I said firmly. There is nothing more to discuss. He turned then, slowly. His expression was no longer relaxed or smug, it was tired. Warren. You think you're the only one who's confused in all this, he said. I blinked, caught off guard by the shift in tone. I don't want to play games, he continued, standing up. But you can't deny there's something. You haven't told anyone. That means something. I shook my head. No. That means I'm trying to keep things professional. He took a step closer. I didn't flinch, but I didn't move forward either. And then, without warning, he reached out and grabbed my wrist. Don't, I said sharply, yanking my arm away. His grip wasn't hard, but the suddenness of it, the assumption behind it, was enough to set my nerves on fire. He gave a faint smile. You're not going to tell anyone, are you? Because you know how this will look. A chill swept through me. That's when the door creaked behind me. I turned. Standing in the hallway, half-shadowed, was his wife. Her eyes were on him. On me. Cold. Controlled. Impossible to read. But she had heard something, enough to change everything. I backed away without saying another word, slipped past her, and out into the corridor, my heart hammering so loud I thought the walls could hear it. I didn't know what she had heard. I didn't know what she believed. But I knew something irreversible had just occurred. The rest of the evening passed in silence for me. My thoughts were a storm. The room. The wrist. The accusation unspoken. Her gaze. I was gathering my things, ready to leave the clinic for the night, when I saw her again. Mrs. Warren. She stood at the front desk, calm and composed. Her coat draped over her shoulders like armor. I need a word, she said, her voice low but unmistakably firm. I hesitated, unsure if I should say no, but something told me I couldn't avoid this. She led me down a quiet hallway into a small, unused office. The door closed behind us with a soft click that sounded far louder than it should have. Then she turned, arms crossed, her eyes sharp. I know what you've been doing with my husband. The words landed like a blow. My heart dropped. No, ma'am, I said quickly, trying to steady my voice. It's not what you think. Don't lie, she snapped. I've seen the way he looks at you. The way you respond. I drew a breath, trying to stay calm. I've done nothing inappropriate. I've only ever acted within the scope of my professional role. Her jaw clenched. You're not the first. The words froze the air between us. I stared at her, unsure if I had heard correctly. What do you mean? She looked away then, for the first time. Her voice softened, but not kindly. He's done this before. The quiet obsession. The pretending it's mutual. The manipulation. And always with women he thinks won't speak up. My breath caught. Everything inside me fell silent. I thought maybe it had stopped, she continued. That maybe this time it was just in my head. But now I know better. She walked past me toward the door, then paused. I'll handle him, she said flatly. But you should protect yourself, too. Then she opened the door and was gone. But you can be the last. With those cold, deliberate words, she turned and walked out, leaving me alone in the dimly lit office. The silence that followed was oppressive. I stood there for what felt like forever, the weight of her statement pressing in around me like a heavy fog. The lines had blurred. The rules had changed. And whatever this was, it wasn't over. The next few days passed in a blur of anxiety and cautious routine. I avoided the east hallway, rerouted my tasks, even altered my break schedule, anything to ensure I didn't see either of them again. I hadn't reported what happened. Not yet. I didn't know why, maybe part of me was still processing, or maybe I feared no one would believe me. But her words echoed in my mind like a ticking clock. You can be the last. And I wanted to believe that. Still, nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. It was late one evening, near the end of a long shift. Most of the clinic staff had already gone home. I was at the nurse's station, finishing a patient file, the quiet hum of the floor settling into end-of-day silence. Then I looked up and froze. Mr. Warren was standing at the far end of the hallway. Alone. Watching. My breath caught. His follow-ups had ended. He wasn't supposed to be here anymore. So why was he still lingering? I stood quickly, collecting my things. I planned to leave through the rear staff exit, avoid the situation entirely. But as I turned the corner, he stepped forward. "Jenna," he said, his voice low and unusually quiet. "I need to talk." I didn't stop walking. "I think we've said enough," I replied firmly, trying to move past him. He stepped into my path, not forcefully but just enough to block me. "She talked to you, didn't she?" I nodded, keeping my posture steady. "Yes. And I think it's best we end whatever this is now, before it becomes something worse." For a moment, I hoped he'd understand. But instead of backing away, he smiled. A slow, unsettling smile that didn't reach his eyes. "She doesn't know the half of it." And that's when it happened again, that cold, sharp tension, like a live wire just beneath my skin. Before I could react, he reached out and grabbed my wrist. "Let go of me," I said, my voice rising as I yanked my arm free. "This is harassment." He didn't look startled. He didn't even flinch. "You're not going to report me," he said calmly. "Because you know how this will play out. Your word against mine." My mouth opened but I couldn't speak. Not because I didn't have the words, but because I had seen something behind him. A shadow. She was there. His wife. Standing at the far end of the hallway, just beyond the overhead light, watching. She had heard everything. Mr. Warren stilled. I saw the realization flicker across his face, as he turned slowly. Mrs. Warren stood with her arms folded, her expression unreadable. But her eyes were sharp, calculating, cold. "Is everything okay here?" she asked, her voice calm. Too calm. I instinctively stepped back. "I was just leaving," I said, and moved past both of them without another word. My hands trembled as I pushed open the staff exit door. The air outside hit my face like a wave of ice. But at least it was real. At least it was free. But my heart wouldn't stop pounding. Had she heard enough to confront him? Would she confront me again? I didn't want to find out. I thought that would be the end of it, that maybe the hallway encounter would be the last. But as I reached for the door to finally leave the clinic, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I spun around, instinctively bracing myself. It was her. Mrs. Warren. "Wait," she said softly. There was no hostility in her voice. Just something quieter, more measured. I stared at her, uncertain whether to run or listen. But something in her tone, something almost tired, made me freeze. "We need to talk," she added, motioning toward a nearby consultation room. I hesitated. But I followed. Inside, the room was small and quiet. She closed the door behind us, her eyes scanning my face before she spoke. "I've seen how he looks at you," she said. "I know what he's capable of." My mouth went dry. "Then why?" "I'm not here to threaten you," she interrupted, her voice firm but even. "I'm here to help you." I blinked, confused. "I'm not the woman you think I am," she continued. "Tom, my husband, has a dark side. He manipulates people. Especially women. I've seen it happen more times than I care to admit." She paused, looking away for a moment. "I've let it slide. For years. Told myself stories. Convinced myself it was all in the past. But it's not. It never was." I stayed silent. Every word was heavy, cutting through the fog that had clouded my instincts for days. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a folder. "This," she said, handing it to me, "is what he's been hiding." Inside were photos. Documents. Messages. Emails. Screenshots of conversations. Reports. Whispered suspicions made visible on paper. Evidence of a man who had perfected the art of charm and quiet coercion. Colleagues. Neighbors. Even a family friend. All of them had been caught in his web. My hands shook as I turned each page. You see, she said, her voice flat now, this isn't just about you. Or me. It's about control. He doesn't care who he hurts. He won't stop. Unless someone stops him. I looked up, stunned. Why tell me all this? She took a slow breath and pulled a small silver key from her purse, placing it gently into my hand. Because I want you to help me expose him, she said. What? You already have one foot in the fire, she said softly. So why not burn it down? The room spun slightly. Was this real? Was she serious? Or was this some strange test of loyalty? Before I could respond, she walked to the door and opened it. Think about it, she said. But don't take too long. He's already planning his next move. And with that, she left. Leaving me standing there. A folder in one hand. A key in the other. And a choice that could change everything. Was I going to walk away, pretend none of this happened, like so many others probably had? Or was I going to stay, and become part of whatever came next?